Hallelujah. You've just heard Let My People Go by Akoti Nakia Ben Bat Yahuda, featuring Aknachamia Ben Israel, Yaleach Bat Israel, and Mikael Korban Yahu. You're listening live to Hebrew Vision. Hebrew Vision Live is our weekly show where we come on every Thursday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we bring to you what is going on in this world in the spirit of prophecy. This month is actually one of our brother Malaku L's month. He's unfortunately not able to make it here this evening, so I'm here hosting the show myself, and will bring to you news in the spirit of prophecy. Before we get into that, I do want to let you all know that anyone can call us in. You can call in on Skype. We're live here on Skype. And you can call on Hebrew Vision. We're live here on Spreaker, and you can call in to converse with us on Skype. And so, before we go ahead and get into our matters of discussion for today, bringing up some current events, I do want to open with prayer as always. So this is the Kaddish di Rabbanan, or the Rabbi's Kaddish. In the spirit of prayer, Yitkadal v'yikadesh shemei rabah, ve'almadi barak herutei v'yimelech malkutei, v'chayichunu v'yamichunu v'chayei kol beit Yisrael, bagalav v'zman kariv v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mavorach le'olam ulmei almaya. Yit barak v'yishtabach, v'yipa'ar v'yitroman, v'yitnasei, v'yitadar, v'yitalei, v'yitalal, shemei kudashah berechu. Le'ela min kol barachata v'ashirata, tushbechata v'nechmata, damiran ba'alma, v'yimeru. Amen. Al Israel ve'al Rabbanan, ve'al Talmidei Chun, ve'al kol Talmidei Chun, ve'al kol mandas akin borita, Di bataracha deng v'di b'kolatar v'yatar yehelachonu chon shlamach harabah hine v'chasida v'rachamim v'chayin arakin umzona roicha ufarkana min kadam abahun di bashamaya v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabah me shemaya v'chayim tovim aleinu v'yakol Israel v'imeru. Amen. Osei shalom b'imromav hu barachamav yasei shalom aleinu v'yakol Israel v'imeru. Amen. Magnified and sanctified may his great name be in the world he created by his will. May he establish his kingdom in your lifetime and in your days and in the lifetime of all the house of Israel swiftly and soon. And let us say amen. May his great name be blessed forever and all time. Blessed and praised, esteemed and exalted, raised and honored, uplifted and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he, beyond any blessing, song, praise, and consolation uttered in the world. And let us say amen. To Israel, to the teachers, their disciples, and their disciples' disciples, and to all who engage in the study of Torah, here or elsewhere, may there come to them and you great peace, favor, kindness, and compassion, long life, ample sustenance, and deliverance from their Father in heaven, and let us say amen. May there be great peace from heaven and good life for us in all the house of Israel, and let us say amen. May he who makes peace in his high places, in his compassion, make peace for us and all the house of Israel. And let us say amen. Well, where to begin? These days are truly apocalyptic, if I may choose a word to describe the current horizons that are over this planet and the conditions that are affecting us in the realm of human affairs. Geopolitically, there is just many intrigues. There are wars and rumors of war. There are diseases. There are famines. There are topplings of empires. There are uprisings and resistance movements. There are many different events taking place which were prophetically mentioned in the Hebrew scriptures and even the Messianic scriptures and even the Apocrypha and even in some pseudepigraphical books that have spoken of these times ages before these things took place. And so in order for us to truly decipher and make sense of our milieu, of our environment, of our times, well then let us look to these signs of the times, as this offering is going to be entitled The Signs of the Times. I want to begin with some words from the Apocrypha to contextualize this and to have some sort of way to analyze our current historical positioning. And this is inclusive of the past and the present, and also relative to the future. So when we turn to the book of 2nd Esdras, the apocryphal book of 2nd Esdras, we want to go to the 8th chapter, and I'm going to read just a bit in order for us to contextualize some of these matters that are taking place in this world prophetically. Esdras is, of course, named after the prophet Ezra. This book is said to be written in the actual ages of, let's see what we have. Most of this was Semitic, written in a Semitic time, Semitic language, and has been preserved entirely almost in the Greek. The Semitic original, and almost all the Greek texts have been lost. And this is now being rediscovered and put together in other languages such as Syriac, the Coptic, the Ethiopic, Arabic, and even some Armenian and Georgian languages. And so this was compiled, some say, in the same era as First Esdras, which was written in the exilic periods of Babylonia and prior and during their return from captivity. in which Josiah is referenced. And this is said, it was typically written after Daniel was in existence, which was around 165 BC. Okay, so this is around the times that this book was written. But this here, again, is the 8th chapter of 2nd Esdras. We're going to start at, let's take a look. Let's just read verse 19b. Pick up there, and we're going to read forward. It says, the beginning of the words of Ezra's prayer before he was taken up. He said, O Yah, who inhabits eternity, whose eyes are exalted and whose upper chambers are in the air, whose throne is beyond measure and whose esteem is beyond comprehension, before whom the hosts of angels stand trembling, and at whose command they are changed to wind and fire, elements, whose word is sure and whose utterances are certain, whose ordinance is strong and whose command is terrible, whose look dries up the depths and whose indignation makes the mountains melt away, and whose truth is established forever. So this is an acknowledgement of the sovereignty, of the providence, of the omnipotence of the one that Israel esteems by the Hebrew letters Yad-He, Wah-He, the self-existing one. And this is to assure those who hear these words or read these words of prophecy, is that despite the current circumstance that the world is facing, particularly Israel, the covenanted people of Yah, that Yah is still in control. This is still under the authority, under the sovereignty, the kingship of the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He continues to go on and say in verse 24, hear, O Yah, the prayer of thy servant, and give ear to the petition of thy creature. Attend to my words. For as long as I live, I will speak, and as long as I have understanding, I will answer. O look not upon the sins of thy people, but at those who have served thee in truth. Regard not the endeavors of those who act wickedly, but the endeavors of those who have kept the covenants amid afflictions. Kept the covenant. Central. Think not on those who have lived wickedly in thy sight, but remember those who have willingly acknowledged that you are to be feared. Let it not be thy will to destroy those who have had the ways of cattle, but regard those who have gloriously taught your law. So you're seeing the juxtapositioning of the nature of humanity in these particular verses that we just read from verse 24 to presently verse 29. And we can see here the levels of consciousness are what is being addressed. Those who are Torah conscious and ultimately Yah conscious, as opposed to those who are just self-conscious. They have not transcended. They have not crossed over to the realm of universal consciousness, which is where Yah dwells. And we call that in Hebrew the Keter, the crown. They have not yet ascended to the crown. Verse 30, be not angry with those who are deemed worse than beasts, but love those who have always put their trust in esteem. For we and our fathers have passed our lives in ways that bring death. But you, because of us sinners, are called merciful. Hallelujah. For if you have desired to have pity on us, who have no works of righteousness, then you will be called merciful. For the righteous who have many works laid up with thee, they have laid up many works. The righteous shall receive their reward in consequence of their own deeds. You reap what you sow. Verse 34, but what is man that thou art angry with him? Or what is a corruptible race that thou art so bitter against it? For in truth, there is no one among those who have been born who has not acted wickedly, and among those who have existed, there is no one who has not transgressed. These are the frailties of our nature. These are the vanities of our nature. These are the desirous longings of our nature. And these are the things which must be overcome in order for us to become universally conscious, to enter into Torah consciousness, to enter into the true messianic consciousness, which is the consciousness of Yah. For in this, O Yah, your righteousness and goodness will be declared when you are merciful to those who have no store of good works. He answered me and said, some things you have rightly spoken, and it will come to pass according to your words. For indeed, I will not concern myself about the fashioning of those who have sinned, or about their death, their judgment, or their destruction. But I will rejoice over the creation of the righteous, over their pilgrimage also, and their salvation, and their receiving their reward. As I have spoken, therefore, so shall it be. This is akin to Genesis 1, when you see at the beginning when light was called forth. Yah acknowledged the light and said the light was good, so he took notice of that. He rejoiced over that. He was pleased with what he had seen. That which was darkness, he did not even mind. He did not even utter anything about the darkness, because the darkness to Yah does not exist in the sense of wickedness being a reality, because it must be eternally separated from this perfect, unified, harmonious, balanced existence. And this is the events that we're seeing in the world even now, these imbalanced, inharmonious, these deplorable and wicked matters that are taking place amongst humanity, these vain matters, these lustful matters that are taking place. Continuing on, verse 41, for just as the farmer sows many seeds upon the ground and plants a multitude of seedlings, and yet not all that have been sown will come up in due season, and not all that were planted will take root, so also those who have been sown in the world will not all be saved. I answered and said, if I have found favor before thee, let me speak. For if the farmer's seeds does not come up because it has not received thy rain in due season, or if it has been ruined by too much rain, it perishes. But man who has been formed by thy hands and is called thy own image, because he is made like thee, and for those whose sake you have formed all things, have you also made him like the farmer's seed? No, O Master, who art over us, but spare your people and have mercy on your inheritance, for you have mercy on your own creation. Now, these images are relative to those who fulfill the commands. For those who fulfill the commands are like the Selim, or the image of Yah. The image of Yah is not a physical image. It is not related to a physical appearance. It is related to a form of one's mind. How is your mind formed? It is related to divine intelligence and divine perception, which will therefore transfer into divine action, divine deeds, heavenly deeds. Okay, so these are the things that we should come to bear to understand as relates to the image of Yah. Not everyone is made in the image of Yah. Not everyone is a child of Yah. Only those who are obedient to the Father's words are the Father's children. Verse 46, he answered me and said, these things that are present are for those who live now, and the things that are future are for those who will live hereafter. So what is going on now is a sign for the world now, for those who are alive. But those things which are for the future are for those who will live hereafter, or thereafter. Hereafter, as it says, verse 47, for you come far short of being able to love my creation more than I love it, but you have often compared yourself to the unrighteous. Never do so. But even in this respect, you will be praiseworthy before the Most High, because you have humbled yourself, as is becoming for you, and have not deemed yourself to be among the righteous in order to receive the greatest esteem. This is the problem with humanity and their vain nature, is that man desires to be esteemed. They desire power. They desire recognition. They desire all the things that are counterproductive to humanity coming together in order to bring forth a better existence for the whole. Men desire for individual accolades. And this is what capitalism is about. We'll talk about that hopefully as we go through this particular few hours of dealing with the sign of the times. And then I guess again is coming from the book of 2nd Esdras. We're reading in the 8th chapter here in Hebrew Vision Live with Mikhail Corbin Yahu. I am here on verse 49. We just completed 49. Now, verse 50 goes on and says, "For many miseries will affect those who inhabit the world in the last times." This is what we're getting to. For many miseries, verse 50, will affect those who inhabit the world in the last times, because they have walked in great pride, just as I was stating. The world is suffering because of the great pride that is present in the hearts and minds of men. But think of your own case and inquire concerning the esteem of those who are like yourself, because it is for you that paradise is open. The humble, the meek, the righteous shall inherit the earth. These are things that are mysterious, but the principles of existence are in the favor. And I mean by this, the divine laws are in the favor of the righteous. And we have to understand our power in those divine laws to bring balance back to creation. Continuing on, 51. But think of your own case and inquire concerning the esteem of those who are like yourself, because it is for you that the paradise is open, that the tree of life is planted, that the age to come is prepared, plenty is provided, a city is built, rest is appointed, goodness is established, and wisdom perfected beforehand. These are the realities that await the righteous upon their carrying out of the responsibility of the representatives and emissaries and ambassadors of this kingdom of which is being spoken. These are things that we must understand. The root is evil. The root of evil, which is the lust of money, is sealed up from you. Illness is banished from you there. And death is hidden, because there is no sin. The wages of sin is death. When all sin is exorcised from us and expelled from us, these are the realities that will await. Sheol has fled and corruption has been forgotten. Sorrows have passed away. And in the end, the treasure of immortality is made manifest. Verse 55. Therefore, do not ask any more questions about the multitude of those who perish, which is what is taking place now. It is unfortunate that many souls are being lost. But these are things that must take place according to the prophetic word. 56. For they also received freedom, but they despised the Most High, and were contemptuous of his law, and forsook his ways. This is why the curse is all over this planet, because the law and the covenant have been forsaken. They've been broken. Therefore, a curse remains, as the prophet Isaiah says. 57. Moreover, they have even trampled upon the righteous ones, his righteous ones. They've trampled upon them and said in their hearts that there is no mighty one, no power, no Elohim, that Yah does not exist, though knowing full well that they must die. They have to give an account for their lives one day. The wicked. 59. For just as the things which I have predicted await you, so the thirst and torment which are prepared await them. For the Most High did not intend that men should be destroyed. That was not the intention of the Most High. But they themselves who were created have defiled the name of him who made them, and have been ungrateful to him who prepared life for them. Therefore, my judgment is now drawing near, and we are nearing the day of Yom Kippur. We are in the 7th month of the year, known as Tishri in the Hebrew tongue. And we are now a mere, 6 days, 5 days now from Yom Kippur, the day of judgment, the day of affliction. So Yah's day is drawing near. We're going to talk about all these things that are going on in the world as we speak. We have some current event articles we're going to get into, but I want to continue this opening selection from the book of 2nd Esdras, starting at chapter 8. We began at verse 819b. We're now in the 60th verse, going to the 61st verse. Therefore, my judgment is now drawing near. I have not shown this to all men, but only to you and a few like you. There are things that are taking place that not everyone is going to see. They're not going to recognize the signs of the time in which we are finding ourselves dead smack in the midst of. Well, these are the things that we're going to address this evening. Then I answered and said, Behold, O Yah, you have now shown me a multitude of the signs which you will do in the last times, but you have not shown me when you will do them. Chapter 9. He answered me and said, Measure carefully in your mind, and when you see that a certain part of the predicted signs are past, then you will know that it is the very time when the Most High is about to visit the world which he has made. So when there shall appear in the world earthquakes, are there not earthquakes ravaging this planet from every continent? We see these earthquakes taking place. We see these volcanoes going off even, which are resultant from earthquakes, tectonic shifts and things shifting and moving. He says when you see tumult of peoples, when you see, for instance, the Standing Rock incident, when you see the student protests in South Africa, when you see what's going on in Africa, throughout the continent, when you see what's going on with Black Lives Matter, when you see what's going on over in France with the civil war between the immigrants and the nationalists there, when you see all these tumults taking place, this is another sign. Intrigues of nations. When you see what's going on with all these financial institutions and these governments and these intrigues that are taking place, these coups. When you see the wavering of leaders, they're wavering. When you see confusion of princes, they don't know what to do. They're clueless. Then you will know that it was of these that the Most High spoke from the days that were of old, from the beginning. For just as with everything that has occurred in the world, the beginning is evident and the end is manifest. So also are the times of the Most High. The beginnings are manifest in wonders and mighty works, and the end in requital and in signs. This requital is referring to the effects of what man has done. And it shall be that everyone who will be saved and will be able to escape on account of his works or on account of the faith by which he has believed will survive the dangers that has been predicted and will see my salvation in my land and within my borders, which I have sanctified for myself from the beginning. Then those who have now abused my ways shall be amazed, and those who have rejected them with contempt shall dwell in torments. For as many as did not acknowledge me in their lifetime, although they received my benefits, and as many as scorned my law, while they still had freedom, and did not understand but despised it, while an opportunity of repentance, this is the season of repentance, was still open to them. These must in torment acknowledge it after death. Therefore do not continue to be curious as to how the ungodly will be punished, but inquire how the righteous will be saved, those to whom the ages belong, and for those whose sake the age was made. Selah. So the intent of this particular broadcast today, which again is called the signs of the times, is to show you that these are the times which we should now be focusing on how the righteous are to be saved. We can preoccupy ourselves so much with how the wicked are going to be destroyed. And I guarantee you, Hebrew Vision is going to start to really look to edify those who are the righteous. We want to focus on that. We've been exposing a lot of things, which I think is important to bring to light some of these things that are in the dark. We are called to do that with the word. We are called to be light ourselves. But we want to also examine how to be that light and to really get into the essence of that. But today, again, we're going to focus on the signs of the times. And we know that in these times, our enemy is roaring about like a lion, seeking whom he may destroy. This is what the purpose of the enemy is all about, is to destroy the covenant and destroy those who are covenanted with the Most High. so that the order of Hillel, the fallen messenger, or Lucifer, who we know as Satan, that old serpent and devil, the dragon, may go about conducting his affairs in his kingdom. But this first article comes to us from Information Clearinghouse. The name of the article, written by John W. Whitehead, which was written on October 5th, yesterday, is called Ways You Can Be Killed During an Encounter with Police. He says, from the Rutherford Institute, which is originally written, how do you protect yourself from flying fists, choking hands, disabling electrified darts, and killing bullets? How do you defend yourself against individuals who have been indoctrinated into believing that they are superior to you? Now keep in mind, these are spiritual matters as well. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and spiritual authorities. These are those principalities at work, the spirit at work in these institutions. So again, how do you defend yourself against individuals who have been indoctrinated into believing that they are superior to you, that their word is law, not Torah, their word is law, and that they have the power to take your life? Most of all, how can you maintain the illusion of freedom when daily Americans, you can say New Guineans, Papua New Guineans, you can say South Africans, you can say no matter where you are being shot, stripped, searched, choked, beaten, and tased by police for little more than daring to frown, smile, question, challenge, and order, or just exist? The short answer, you can't. Now for the long answer, which is far more complicated, but still leaves us feeling hopeless, helpless, and vulnerable to the fears, moods, and misguided training of every cop on the beat. If you ask police and their enablers what Americans should do to stay alive during encounters with law enforcement, they will tell you to comply or die. It doesn't matter where you live, John Whitehead says, big city, small town. It's the same scenario being played out over and over again, in which Americans are being brainwashed into believing that anyone who wears a government uniform, soldier, police officer, prison guard, must be obeyed without question, while government agents, hyped up on their own authority and the power of their uniform, ride roughshod over the rights of the citizenry. This is the clash of kingdoms, people. This is the clash of kingdoms that we're seeing take place. Yah has created each and every individual themselves to be sovereign. And I mean that in its purest sense, to be self-determined. Unless you truly break a law, unless you truly commit a crime, which includes harming or killing someone, either maliciously or even if it was unintended, there is a punishment that must be exacted from that. Damaging others' property is considered a crime. And recklessly endangering society, those are crimes. Those are crimes. Stealing, okay, that's criminal. But there's other things that are not considered crimes, which even the Constitution protects certain judgments and certain punishments from occurring. But these are things that have been completely usurped and completely distorted and completely perverted for the sake of being a totalitarian empire whose victims blood, let me be more specific, fuels the energy of this particular system. For example, a local law enforcement agency in Virginia has started handing out a guide developed in cooperation with a group of African American pastors on how to interact with police. The purpose of this government resource, according to the police, is to make sure citizens feel comfortable, like some anesthesia, and know what to do when interacting with police in order to promote public safety and respectful interaction. Curiously, nowhere in the guide to interacting with police is there any mention of the Constitution or the rights of the citizenry other than the right to remain silent. In fact, see, and this is what they bank on, your ignorance. You do not know these things, so you cannot protect yourself from these things. The Constitution, much like the Torah, from which the source of law comes, even though Torah is a much more later development in terms of human history, being just a little over what is known in human history is 6,000 years old. I do understand the Torah itself being an eternal document, but let me digress from that. Going back to the Constitution, which guarantees you the rights to life, to liberty, property, which was originally intended, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so there's things that, again, if you don't do, you should not be detained, you should not be arrested, you should not be charged, you should not be indicted, you should not be sentenced and found guilty if those things cannot be substantially proven, with evidence, with 2 or more witnesses. This is law. So, in fact, the primary point stressed throughout the bilingual guide aimed at building trust and cooperation is that citizens should comply, cooperate, obey, not resist, not argue, not make threatening gestures or statements, avoid sudden movements, and submit to a search of their person and belongings. The problem, of course, is what to do when compliance is not enough. I'm not talking about the number of individuals, especially young people, who are being shot and killed by police for having a look-alike gun in their possession, such as a BB gun. I'm not even talking about people who have been shot for brandishing weapons at police, such as scissors. I'm talking about the growing number of unarmed people who are being shot and killed for just standing a certain way, or moving a certain way, or holding on to something, anything that police could misinterpret to be a gun, or igniting some trigger-centric fear in a police officer's mind that has nothing to do with an actual threat to their safety. Killed for standing in a shooting stance, and we know this just took place in California. Killed for holding a cell phone, Arizona just recently happened. Killed for behaving oddly and holding a baseball bat, which happened in also Chicago. Killed for opening the front door, an older woman. Killed for being a child in a car pursued by police. Killed for attacking police with a metal spoon. Killed for running in an aggressive manner holding a tree branch. Killed for crawling around naked. Killed for hunching over in a defensive posture. Killed because a police officer accidentally pulled out his gun instead of his taser. Killed for wearing dark pants and a basketball jersey. Killed for telling police you lawfully own a firearm and have a conceal and carry permit. Killed for leaving anywhere at all when a police officer shows up. Killed for driving while deaf. Killed for being homeless. Killed for being old and brandishing a shoehorn. All these are examples of individuals who have been killed because the police felt that day it was his duty to serve as judge, jury, and executioner. The article goes on to say, now you can make all kinds of excuses to justify these shootings. And in fact, that's exactly what you'll hear from politicians, police unions, law enforcement officials, and individuals who are more than happy to march in lockstep with the police. However, to suggest that a good citizen is a compliant citizen and that obedience will save us from the police state is not only recklessly irresponsible, but it is also deluded and out of touch with reality. Because in the American police state, compliance is no longer enough. Frankly, as these incidents make clear, the only true compliant, submissive, and obedient citizen in police state is a dead one. If you're starting to feel somewhat overwhelmed, intimidated, and fearful for your life and your property, you should be. He points out in his book, The Battlefield of America, The War on the American People, that we the people are now at the mercy of law enforcement officers who have almost absolute discretion to decide who is a threat, what constitutes resistance, and how harshly they can deal with the citizens they were appointed to serve and protect. Well, we know that was not the intent. They serve and protect the elite, the landowners, the masters, quote unquote, in this capitalistic system. Sad, isn't it? How quickly we have gone from a nation of laws, which we know for everyone it wasn't applicable, where the least among us had just as much as right to be treated with dignity and respect as the next person, at least in principle, to a nation of law enforcers, revenue collectors with weapons, who treat us all like suspects and criminals. I want to bring an interesting perspective into this before I get to another article. Of course, we're going to have several articles that we're going to deal with. So, again, when you're looking at Rome, Imperial Rome, the police state that they ushered in during the first century in Judea. Very similar situations were present. And what we're seeing is this new resurrected empire, much more expansive, much more broad. But the markings and the signs are all there. And we can see the brutality of this beast carry out its agenda. And this is global. I mean, America is a focal point because America is supposed to be the bastion of world freedom and democracy, and order. But when we look at what is really taking place, and we go back to the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, we can see that this fourth beast was unlike any other. Let me go back to the 7th chapter. I want to go to the 7th verse. Now, this is following the identification or his prophetic utterance of the kingdoms of Babel or Babel, Media, Persia, and Greece. In verse 7, he identifies the Holy Roman Empire in saying this: "After this I looked in the night visions, and I saw a fourth beast, fearsome and burly, exceedingly strong, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the rest with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I was thinking about the horns, then saw another horn, a little one, coming up among them. And 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots before it. And see, eyes like the eyes of a man were in this horn, and a mouth speaking great words." Now, this can be understood particularly as the Vatican. Okay, this is the little horn, the little city in this great empire. At one time that was centered in Rome. Of course, we know that Vatican City is in Rome, but this little horn, which has eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great words, is, of course, the Pontifex Maximus. Okay, and we can see that historically throughout history. But of course, there's some other things that we'll discuss in this particular matter as well that we'll deal with. But verse 9 says, "I was looking on until the thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. His throne was flames of fire, its wheels burning fire. A stream of fire was flowing and coming forth from his presence, and 1,000 had served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judge was seated, and the books were open." Now, this is setting up for the day of judgment. Yom Kippur again. This is all coming back to Yom Kippur. This is the day of judgment. And these are the ways that the world will be righted when the covenanted people restore themselves to the orders of their covenant and are gathered and are in place and in position and empowered to carry forth the judgments of this kingdom through their obedience to the covenant. And of course, the covenant is the Torah, more expressly, the laws, the commandments, the statutes, the right rulings, the ordinances, the wisdom and the fear of Yah. Verse 11, "I was looking, then because of the sound of the great words which the horn was speaking, I was looking until the beast was killed and his body destroyed and given to the burning fire. And the rest of the beasts had their rule taken away, but a lengthening of life was given to them for a season and a time." I want to come down some. I want to look at this beast a little more. Verse 17, "These great beasts which are four sovereigns which rise up from the earth. Then the set apart ones of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I desired for certainty concerning the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, very fearsome." This difference is because it is a transmogrified beast that has extended its reach in a way that had never been known before, had taken on other kingdoms and empires in a way that had never been done before. This was very fearsome, with its teeth of iron. This means it was just a ruthless killing machine. Its nails of bronze, it just trampled things down, which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the rest with its feet. concerning the 10 horns that were on its head, and of the other horn that came up before, which 3 fell. This horn, which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke great words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was looking, and this horn was fighting against the set apart ones. This is what is taking place right now, and was prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and right ruling was given to the set apart ones of the Most High. And the time came, and the set apart ones took possession of the reign. This is what he said. The fourth beast is the fourth reign. This reign that we are now at the end of, the age of the Gentiles, the times of the Gentiles, is summed up in this particular reign that we're dealing with right now. This is different from all other reigns, and it devours all the earth which we see taking place right now. It tramples it down and crushes it. And the 10 horns are 10 sovereigns from this reign. They shall rise, and another shall rise after them. And it is different from the first ones, and it humbles 3 sovereigns. Now, this is where you can see, since the Lateran Treaty was made in 1923, that there have been 10 kings or 10 popes that have rose in the Vatican. So these are the signs that we need to see to understand the time in which we exist. And you can look that up for yourself. Francis is in fact the 10th, and what some say the final pope, even though a new black pope is about to be elected, which is the Jesuit superior, the superior general of the Society of Jesus. So the 10 horns are the 10 sovereigns from this reign. They shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and it is different from the first ones. This is the first Jesuit pope ever. So that's different from these others. And it humbles 3 sovereigns, and it speaks words against the Most High, and it wears out the set apart ones of the Most High, which it's doing. And it intends to change appointed times. It's done it. And law, it's done it. And they are given into his hand for a time, in times, and half a time. And I'm just going to pause there and want you all to see that this is a very interesting matter that we're dealing with as relates to police brutality or police terrorism. Because, yes, there are racist overtones in this as well. But there is a greater paradigm to this that we have to look at. And that is the paradigm of class warfare. Because this isn't affecting just so-called quote-unquote black people. This isn't affecting those who are identified as white. It is affecting those who are identified as brown. It is affecting those who are identified as red. Not so much the yellow man here, interesting. The Asian is not so much affected by these matters. But this is what this article from Signs of the Times, actually from the World Socialist website by Patrick Martin, he wrote this on October 4th. He says police brutality is class warfare, not race war. That's what they're baiting this up to be. This is class warfare. 19 Americans killed by cops this week. This was on the 4th. So starting from Sunday, or Yom Rishon, to Yom Shalishi, we had 19 people killed in America by police officers, and most of them were not black. So he says at least 19 people lost their lives in encounters with police in the United States last week. So that was last week, okay? The victims, all men, ranged in ages from 18 to 53. 17 were shot to death, 1 tased, and 1 both tased and beaten and strangled. In only 2 of the cases were the victims shot while engaged in violent attacks on others. All the others were shot while fleeing or allegedly resisting police or while experiencing mental health or emotional crises. In several instances, the police killing sparked protests in El Cajon, California, a suburb of San Diego. There were protests over the death, September 27, of Alfred Olongo, an immigrant from Uganda who was tased and shot to death while unarmed. Olongo was having an emotional breakdown after hearing of the death of a friend. Serving and protecting, right? In Pasadena, California, a suburb of Los Angeles, more than 100 people gathered to protest the killing of Reginald Thomas, father of 8 children, after police were called to address a domestic dispute early Friday. The 36-year-old black man, who was reportedly bipolar, was said to be waving a knife and a fire extinguisher when police arrived. Despite the claims by Democratic Party politicians and middle class groups like Black Lives Matter that police violence is exclusively a matter of race, with white cops killing African Americans, the 19 victims last week included at least 8 white men, a Hispanic man, and an Asian man. This is still a disproportionately high number of blacks who make up just 12% of the U.S. population, which is not, to be overlooked. We cannot overlook that. Not to say that there is not race. As I mentioned in the beginning, there are what we know as deputized Klansmen in these matters, but this is also an imperial matter as well, and we'll get to that, and that's dealing with class, and we'll talk about that shortly. So the race of police killers was usually not reported, but the killings took place in many cities with racially diverse police forces, including Newark, New Jersey, Houston, Texas, and Los Angeles and San Diego, California. The geographic distribution of the killings included inner cities, suburbs, and rural areas in all regions of the country from the Northeast to the Pacific coast. By states, the killings fell as follows. Arizona, Arkansas, and California had 3 last week. Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Michigan had 2. Minnesota, New Jersey had 2. Ohio, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. Texas had 2, and then there was West Virginia. The death toll on a single day, Friday, September 30th, gives a glimpse of the savage character of social relations in the U.S. and the unrestrained brutality of the police, who serve as the front line of defense for capitalist property and the authority of the capitalist state. There were no less than 7 victims on the 30th. No less than 7. These included, in addition to Reginald Thomas in Pasadena, Clayton Eugene Baker, 24, he was a white man, Douglas Maricus Rainey, a 32-year-old black man, Richard Parent, a 37-year-old white man, Najir Salam and George Richards Myers, both 18 years old, shot to death by New York, New Jersey police. And then Jaquarius M. Robinson was a 20-year-old black man killed by police SWAT team in Columbus, Ohio. Public attention is focused on the killings in Southern California because these provoked angry protests, albeit on a limited scale and without further clashes with the police. Tensions rose again over the weekend after an 18-year-old black youth, Carnell Snell, was shot to death by police about 1 p.m. Saturday in South Los Angeles after police stopped a car on suspicion that it was stolen. 2 people fled from the car and police shot and killed one of them, later identified as Snell. Police claimed to have found a handgun at the scene, but there was no indication that the youth had the gun in his possession or had fired it. Police frequently place throwdown guns at the site of such shootings to provide retroactive justification, and you saw that clearly in the case of Keith Scott in North Carolina, where the cop blatantly throws the gun down, and you can see that as they loop it over and over and over. So, just to wrap this article up, the comment of the author, that's not John Whitehead, this is actually, again, Patrick Martin. He says that class, not race, is the primary detriment of who gets killed by the enforcers, a fact that is almost completely lost in a climate where hysteria favors the super rich, super elite, because ordinary people turn against each other and forget about the bank bailouts, the illegal wars, the rigged elections, the illegal surveillance state, the destruction of civil liberties. The list goes on and on. Okay, so in a bigger picture, in a much, much larger picture, this is just a tactic to go about going about securing their goal, which is imperialism, to control the world, to dominate the world. Race is a factor in that, not denying the existence of it. Race is a huge, huge effect as relates to a reality of people who are identified as quote unquote black or African American or African. Okay, the social engineered reality, or illusion of racism cannot be denied. But we also have to keep in perspective a bigger analysis, and that is, again, this is a capitalist system. Okay? But I do want to come back and look at this imperially as relates to our experience as being what we call, quote unquote, black, the black experience. And again, Hebrew Vision Live here with Mikael Corbin Yahoo. This is the sign of the times. You can call us in if you have any questions or comments. on Skype at Hebrew Vision. Feel free to touch base, call in, type in a question, and we'll be more than glad to engage in dialogue. But this is an article, again, relating to the Pan-African experience. And I know as Hebrew Vision, we are Pan-Africanists here as well as Israelites. But this is an article by Emily Williams and a William Mentor. It previously appeared on the Praxis Center as well as Portside, but this comes to us from the Black Agenda Report. The name of the article is called Making Violence Visible, From Black Lives Matter to Stop the Bleeding Africa. They open with a quote. The African continent and black people around the world are disproportionately located at the bottom of a global system that systematically sucks wealth upward toward the top 1%, capitalism, through race. In June 2015, a coalition of 6 Pan-African activist networks launched Stop the Bleeding Africa in Nairobi, Kenya, to curb the hemorrhage of resources from the African continent. As the Black Lives Matter movement continued to gain strength in the United States, not saying I'm a supporter of Black Lives movement, but there is an awareness that has come about through the Black Lives Matter movement, even though we know that it is funded through the Soros Foundation, the Ford Foundation, some other foundations as some agent provocateurs to go about fanning the winds for the fires to spread of this race war that they're planning to unleash. But again, as the Black Lives Matter movement continued to gain strength in the United States, this Pan-African coalition came together to expose and mobilize global support to end illicit financial flows money that is illegally earned, transferred, or used. Estimates of illegal transactions in Africa show a loss of at least $50 billion to $80 billion in wealth every year, a figure that would be incalculably more if transfers made legal by loopholes and unfair treaties were included. Some flows are only seen as legal because the laws are written and interpreted by those profiting from them. Nevertheless, the outflow of clearly illegal funds is far greater than the estimated $40 billion a year that Africa receives in official development assistance. As explained in a 16-minute video from the United Nations Economic Commission on Africa, the Stop the Bleeding campaign includes official commitments by African governments. However, implementing these commitments depends on large-scale mobilizations within Africa and around the world. Unlike the pillage of Africa in earlier periods of the slave trade and colonial rule, these illicit financial transactions are most often hidden from public view. They happen through fraudulent invoicing of trade, creating accounting by multinational corporations, tax giveaways by African governments, and the use of shell companies based in tax havens around the world, including Delaware, Luxembourg, Panama, the British Virgin Islands, Liberia, and Mauritius. Despite repeated revelations, notably the recent Panama paper scandal, the public eye glazes over at billions of dollars cited alongside obscure company names and a complex web of financial links across national and continental borders. This article seeks to do the following. 1, introduce readers to the Stop the Bleeding campaign and make the tremendous loss of resources from African countries via illicit financial flows more visible. 2, begin to make the case for linking Black Lives Matter and Stop the Bleeding with the understanding that the same system of misappropriation of wealth is hurting people in Africa and elsewhere in the world, including the U.S. So we need to connect these dots. We are connected to an international imperialist system known as Mystery Babylon that is bleeding the entire earth. But we, as a Pan-African people, of which Israel is a part of, because Israel is on the continent of Africa, we may not be Hamites expressly, but we are an African people. Let's be clear about that. We are continentally identified as an African people. We have black skin. We share a phenotype with the continent. We have to identify with the continent and also be the spiritual light to that continent that needs that light in order to rise up and do what is required of us to repair this age, this order. Okay? So again, I'm going to make this second point in this article clear. Begin to make the case for linking Black Lives Matter and the Stop the Bleeding movement with the understanding that the same system of misappropriation of wealth is hurting people in Africa and elsewhere in the world, including the U.S. This will ultimately include those who are righteous Gentiles, those Gentiles who desire justice, those Gentiles who desire peace, those Gentiles who desire truth. We can't be so on our high horse about what color we are. This is not a matter of flesh and blood. Because when you look at it, there are people, as Robert Mugabe recently said, in Africa, leaders, African leaders, who are no good for Africa. They're no good for Africa. Just like we got leaders in America, black leaders, who are no good for quote-unquote black Americans. They're no good. So we can't get caught up in the appearance of individuals. We have to look at the content of their character, as Dr. King told us. These are the things that we have to understand. And 3, this also offers several domestic and global policy changes that could make a difference on both sides of the Atlantic. So this is an article you can go and read here. But the looting machine is what this is all about. An international capitalist looting machine. Okay, these are the things that we're suffering from. I'm not going to hang much on this article. I've got several other articles I want to get into. And let you know this is a connection. This is, again, another article that comes to us from Strategic Culture magazine, or the Strategic Culture Foundation. Okay? This is written on the 4th of October as well by Alex Gorka. The name of the article is called U.S. Preparing for War in Africa. They're preparing for war in Africa. They're at war with us clearly here. But now they're in war in Syria. They're in war in Africa. They're in war in the Ukraine. They're in war in Afghanistan. They're in war in Iraq. So you can see what's taking place. This is an imperial move. This is chess, not checkers. The big new Brzezinski, the grand chessboard. You got to understand this in this bigger perspective. The U.S. preparing for war with Africa, in Africa. The United States military is a global force with bases spanning 6 continents and at least 74 countries with over 150,000 U.S. servicemen serving there. By comparison, France has bases in 10 countries, and the UK has bases in 7. America is currently engaged in 5 wars: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Yemen. Forgot Yemen. Its forces are also involved in lesser conflicts in Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. With Syria and Iraq on the radar screen, other combat actions are largely out of the news. The U.S. has 662, far away from that infamous number, military bases around the world from which airstrikes can be launched. Special operation forces are also stationed there. As if it were not enough, the U.S. is expanding its global operational capabilities. The one continent in which U.S. military action rarely receives any attention for is Mama Africa. In recent years, the U.S. has rolled out an extensive network of over 60 outposts and access points in at least 34 African countries, more than 60% of the nations on the continent. To compare, the U.S. has only 50 diplomatic missions in Africa. So they're getting more military outposts than they are diplomatic outposts, all right? So you can see what the intent is. Niger is being turned into an important hub for military activities in the region. This year, the United States will complete the construction of military air base in the city of Agadez in the southern Saharan state of Niger. The base will be used for operations of MQ-9 Reaper drones, which are a larger and more modern than the MQ-1 Predator unmanned aerial vehicle deployed in other places. According to The Intercept, the base in Niger is considered the most important U.S. military construction effort in Africa. The Agadez base will seemingly become the Pentagon's most second important drone site in Africa after Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. Since the U.S. opened the Djibouti base shortly after September 11, 2001, it has grown from 88 acres with 900 military personnel to around 500 acres with 5,000 military personnel. In May 2014, the U.S. reached an agreement with the government of Djibouti that secures its presence through 2044 for the sum of $70 million per year. Camp Lemonnier is currently undergoing a $1.4 billion upgrade, expanding everything from aircraft maintenance hangars, ammunition shelters, and runway extensions to accommodation facilities. The runway being built will be capable of launching C-17, the largest cargo planes in the U.S. inventory. So you can see what's taking place. I'm not going to read this entire article. The development, the imperial desires and designs of this entity, this machine is revving up. But this is all symbolic of stuff. What we can see taking place on the horizon when war is escalated, that is because the economy is hurting. War is good for business. This is what governments understand. Secular governments, beastly governments, satanic governments understand that war is the fuel of their finance. These are common thoughts that pervade these halls called government offices and capitals and meeting rooms and think tanks and institutions of higher learning. This is where all these things are playing. This article, interestingly, comes to us from the Event Chronicle. It is from the financial section of the particular website by an Axel Merck, who writes on October 5th that the end of the dollar dominance is near. This is the other elephant in the room. It's unfolding right before our eyes. This is why this expansion is taking place. This is what caused Rome to implode. They had too many wars in too many different areas. The home front was weak. The infrastructure was deteriorating. The morality of the people, the intelligence of the people was starting to deteriorate and erode until ultimately Rome became no more as a world power. They became subject to other powers in history. Well, these are the days of what one of my elders says, the changing of the horse and the rider. Where is Israel on the scene? But let's get to this article again. The end of the U.S. dollar dominance. Axel Merck warns of the other elephant in the room. He says the end of U.S. dollar dominance may be unfolding in front of our eyes. No, we don't think China's ascent is the key threat. Instead, key to understanding the U.S. dollar may be to understand the money market fund you might hold. Let me explain what's unfolding in front of our eyes and what it means for the U.S. dollar and global markets. Typically, when we think about potential threats to the dollar, we think a different reserve currency might take over, or that foreigners might dump their dollar holdings. I will touch on these, but then dive into what may be a much bigger elephant in the room. So he says foreigners holding U.S. debt. Yes, they hold trillions in U.S. debt, and if they were to dump all their debt, borrowing costs in the U.S. might rise. Except it hasn't happened. In our analysis, as foreigners have been selling U.S. treasuries, the dollar has neither plunged nor have U.S. borrowing costs skyrocketed. Why is that? As we will discuss below, we believe in the short term, other market forces have been even stronger. That said, the recent decision by Congress to override President Obama's veto to allow private citizens to sue Saudi Arabia should get our attention. I didn't know that. Just reading that here. That's some stuff that we need to be aware of. Saudi Arabia has threatened to sell its U.S. assets in case this law passes, as it doesn't want a judge to freeze their assets. Okay? This could be an issue. It may not be an empty threat. He writes he may be a threat because there might be other reasons for the Saudis to sell U.S. treasuries, such as a need to raise cash to deal with the fiscal challenges that have resulted from lower oil prices. Some say the inclusion of China's currency into the official basket of reserve currencies. The yuan is now a special drawing reserve by the International Monetary Fund or of the International Monetary Fund, which is a clear sign that we have the beginning of the end of dollar dominance. In our assessment, the change is mostly symbolic. First of all, the new special drawing reserve basket barely changes the U.S. dollar weighting. Other currencies were reduced to make space for the yuan. Second, no large country manages its reserves according to the formula provided by the special drawing reserve. Instead, we allege that they manage them according to what they believe to be in their perceived self-interest. Where SDRs or special drawing reserves come into play is when the IMF provides a loan, as those are typically denominated in SDR, special drawing reserves. A belief in this theory suggests a great belief in the power of the IMF, which is a private institution again, much like the Federal Reserve. These are where central banks are all centered with the IMF. An institution that has, ever since its inception, looked for reasons to be relevant. I'm not trying to discredit this theory, but as a firm believer that market forces playing out may well overwhelm the bureaucrats at the IMF for a long time. But it turns out that those that predict the end of the dollar dominance might still be right, not because of the IMF, though, but because of what we believe are massive changes underway in how anyone from foreign governments to foreign banks to foreign and domestic corporations fund themselves. Here's where it gets interesting. Understanding money market funds. At the peak of the Eurozone debt crisis in 2011, we cautioned that U.S. investors weren't immune from the potential fallouts because prime money market funds, i.e. the typical money market fund that doesn't exclusively invest in the U.S. government securities, at that time had incredible exposure to European banks. So there are some exposures that the European banks were privy to that typical market money funds weren't exclusively privy to themselves. It turns out that European banks historically have had great funding needs in U.S. dollars because they extended the U.S. dollar denomination loans in emerging markets, amongst others. At the time, we calculated that the average prime money market fund had half of its investment in U.S. dollar-denominated commercial paper issued by often weak European banks. Our analysis showed one money market fund of a major brokerage firm had 75% of its holdings in such paper. We weren't the only ones warning about this, and within months we gauged that the overall quality of investments held by money market funds improved. Sure enough, though everyone appears to be chasing yield, and your money market fund portfolio manager may not have been immune from it either. So these are the things that go down to what the Libra market scandal took place, okay? These reflections of how the U.S. dollar funding outside the U.S. could affect other countries. But these things actually are all predicated on what we know as fiat dollars. And these fiat dollars are only cancerous to its own system because it inflates so much that eventually this bubble has to go pop. So we're going to take a look at this article that explains such a situation. This is called economic cancer. This is what's taking place globally. Economic cancer. The global economic system is metastasizing on itself. The dollar and its dominance, in its special drawing reserve, and its petrodollar position is now finding itself challenged. We're seeing the emergence of the BRICS nations come forth, which is a different paradigm than the Western paradigm. Nonetheless, it is still an imperial paradigm. And so this article here entitled Economic Cancer is going to explain that. The yuan, interestingly though, is backed by gold now, which makes it a very, very different special drawing reserve, the currency with the IMF. But Jeff Nielsen today writes in Silver Doctors, informed readers understand that the mainstream media is nothing more than an echo chamber for the propaganda of the banking crime syndicate which rules over us, previously dubbed the One Bank. the economic propaganda generated by these puppet masters is the most damaging and misleading area of mass brainwashing to which we are exposed. This is because it is economic propaganda, in particular, which facilitates the systemic crimes of the one bank. Out of this vast compendium of economic mythology, the most misleading and most malicious of all this propaganda is inflation-deflation mythology. This is what we know as credit. This is what we know as faith. This is what is known as the root of all evil, the lust of this particular currency, of money, of currency in particular, and money has drawn the world into all types of evils. And this deception that is accompanying it is furthering the evils that are spreading and abounding as love waxes cold because of lawlessness. Continuing, a recent commentary focused specifically on deflation mythology. Deflation is portrayed by the bankers, the puppet politicians, and media drones as the ultimate evil. Anti-deflation mythology is not merely totally opposite the truth, but the fear-mongering on this subject borders on hysteria. The reason for such shrill brainwashing on the subject of deflation is a simple one. For the financial criminals of the big banks, deflation is their greatest fear, like silver bullets to a werewolf or a holy cross to a vampire. The difference is that bankers are real creatures and their phobia towards deflation is very, very real. What does deflation do? In a capitalist system, it cleanses it. We need to be encouraging deflation because it cleanses this filth that we know as capitalism, which is completely based on what we know as the Bretton Woods Agreement, even though it goes back prior to that. But the global system came into existence with the Bretton Woods Agreement, which brought forth these Federal Reserve banks, these independently owned central banking systems, which are seeking to position themselves in these other countries to extract the resources. And we just read about that with Africa, how all these bases are in place to really extract the resources, but we're calling for the bleeding to stop. Deflation is the one and only mechanism for purging bad debt and malinvestment from any economy. The big bank crime syndicate is nothing more than a $1+ quadrillion steaming mound of malinvestment. Should a real deflationary wave ever be unleashed upon our economies, it would vaporize these institutions of financial crime. Parallel to this, one of the main crimes products of the one bank is systematic debt or systemic debt, drowning everyone and everything in excessive volumes of debt and then collecting interest on all that debt. Nothing more than debt slavery. Should deflation ever impact upon the insolvent economies of the Western world, all of the economies of the Western world are insolvent. They're illusionary. Are insolvent corporations, including the big banks themselves, and insolvent individuals. The only possible outcome will be debt jubilee. This is what the scriptures speak about every 7 years. And on that 50th year, we declare, particularly the 50th year, a jubilee, the release and the canceling of all debts. Capitalists fear that. This is what the Torah requires. They're trying to extend this cycle into a realm that it cannot be extended. And because of that, they're prolonging a judgment that is going to mound up and is going to just devastate everyone who's accompanied and who's incorporated with this particular beast financially. This is why the scriptures calls for us to come out of her, to release these things. I can continue reading this here, but I have more articles I want to touch on in relation to what is taking place, because there is a serious unfolding of events taking place. And the reason for war, this is the reason why I wanted to start with that particular matter with the police and the military, is because, again, war generates finance. Finance provides power. Power is what gives man that pride. That pride is what causes man to fall. Okay? And what we're seeing is the fall of this Western civilization, what we see of in Scripture as the times of the Gentiles, because for the past 2,000 years plus, the Gentiles, going back to Alexander from Macedonia, have ruled. They've used the principles of capitalism. They've used cultural hegemony to proclaim their dominance and what they know as manifest destiny on this earth. They've used racism to further justify their wicked deeds. But these are the days of reckoning. These are the days of unfolding, of apocalypse, of revelation. These things are being brought before the world to see. And humanity must decide which side of history will they find themselves on when the dust settles. This is a call to all nationalities. We are not racist in this particular reality. We are nationalists, yes, but we are not exclusive nationalists. We understand that any and everyone can be a part of the kingdom of Yah if their hearts and their minds are willing to learn of the Torah and to live according to the Torah. That we bear no hatred or no hostility towards some or anyone, but this must be done in spirit and truth. Israel is beyond the flesh. A true Israelite is one who is so inwardly, according to the Spirit. We're seeing hurricanes again with Matthew. The last number I saw, leaving a trail of death behind in Haiti of 162 people. We're seeing Florida now warned that storm will kill people. But what has not been seen this past weekend is that the internet was taken over by a global monopoly. And no one noticed. This was written on October 2nd by Claire Burnish on Activist Post. And again, the article's name is "The Internet was just taken over by a global monopoly and no one even noticed." Claire Burnish said on Saturday, the United States ceded oversight of one of the Internet's most basic and fundamental functions, the so-called root zone, which governs new domain names and addresses, handing it over to a small, nonprofit group by allowing a 47-year contract to expire. For decades, the U.S. Commerce Department held a contract with the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, which is ICANN, whose executives and board of directors must now report to an Internet stakeholder community loosely comprised of academics, activists, engineers, government officials, and, of course, corporate interests. In theory, this advisory panel could revoke ICANN's authority entirely should it not live up to expectations, but all actions are supposed to be done by consensus, quote, end quote. With the lapse of this contract, the U.S. fulfilled its objective to privatize the Internet, something proponents claim would help bolster its integrity around the world. As the Internet rapidly expanded around the planet, many felt U.S. oversight anachronistic, outdated. This transition was envisioned 18 years ago, said Stephen Croker, chairman of the ICANN board, an engineer who helped develop early Internet protocols, in a statement cited by AFP. Yet it was the tireless work of the global Internet community which drafted the final proposal that made this a reality. Okay, so now we're seeing the Internet being turned over to an international core. And we know that globalism is something, or what we know as the New World Order, this one world government, this one world economy, this one world religion, is all coming together. For these are the signs of the times. The Internet is a major highway of information. Some of it may not be all credible, but the access to this particular information is what makes it so important for us. And if they're now shutting down voices, alternative voices, such as Michael Savage, not to say I support Michael Savage, not to say I'm a listener of his show, but they banned Michael Savage. And they completely denied his First Amendment right. And so these are the things that are taking place. We're seeing journalists being silenced. We're seeing journalists being attacked. We're seeing journalists have to find political sanctuary in other countries because of their voice. And this has always been the case. In other countries where it's not as free, journalists are always some of the first to be silenced. So what does this mean? So we hear that this was turned over to an international body. I'm just kind of jumping from article to article in the sake of time, or for the sake of time. And so this next article I want to bring to our attention is talking about what does this mean now? What does all this mean now that the internet has been given over control to an international body? Well, Ready Nutrition gives us an article by Jeremiah Johnson. And I just want to read some of the points that he makes. He does say, of course, this is a very, very bad situation for the world. He says that October 1st, the U.S. control over the internet was handed over to ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Pretty much nothing worked in stopping this turning over of the internet, and that what this eventually does, as my computer's freezing, give me one moment, it actually allows other countries such as Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, Iran, and Cuba to have control of the internet and its function. So these are these stakeholders that can have control over the internet. So what does this mean? Let's look at some of the problems. I'm just going to read some of the problems from this individual perspective that soon will arise from this transfer of the internet. Loss of the ability or decreased ability to access conservative independent news media sites. So they're starting to censor more sites. Censorship of postings and comments for the aforementioned sites. Problems with emails and email delivery. Slowdown and or delay of internet service. An exponential increase in trolls and other disparaging, non-productive commuters on sites. Inability or difficulty making purchases online for varying articles of equipment of preparation such as night vision devices, adapters, anything firearm related, literature pertaining to prepping, survival, or current event perspectives from a non-globalist perspective. Complete monitoring of all personal business and private communications. Problems with personal finances, including shopping, bank accounts, checking, bill payments, and anything in these categories that is done via the internet. So now that these problems are out in the open, how would they affect us as individuals from a national perspective? Well, Jeremiah goes on to say that national defense will be affected. Ever since the Grid X 2014 in Hawaii, where we allowed Russians and Chinese to participate in drills with the U.S. military, we have been at much greater risk. The Russians and Chinese now know the vulnerabilities regarding the electrical power infrastructure of the United States, as well as how an EMP or an electromagnetic pulse would affect them. Chinese hackers can now access our computer systems and no longer have to hack. The internet has been effectively handed over to them. Shipping, all critical transportation systems for food, medicine, and other important necessities now have their inventories and shipping at the mercy of ICANN. Finance, it will now be a simple matter to either access or crash bank accounts, IRAs, pensions, and business venues such as Wall Street, the FDIC, and the Federal Reserve. It can easily now be shut down with the flip of a switch. So these are the things that have taken place. So you can see this is the international control. If they want America to go dark, flip of a switch. Censorship. All of the countries mentioned will have a say in what is permitted. And they are not icons of freedom of speech in their own nations. They have long desired to see censorship imposed on the U.S. Such will mean the loss of the rendering as ineffective the independent and conservative news media, or liberal even as well. Monitoring us in all of our activities, and this has military applications for those nations as intelligence is gathered upon the economic, social, and political actions of another nation. All right. So these are things here that have taken place. And this is Jeremiah Johnson is the nom de plume of a retired Green Beret of the U.S. Army Special Forces, okay? He was a medic, an EMT, and ACLS certified. So this is not just some quack talking. This is someone with inside information. And he's giving us what's taking place in this particular world as relates to what the internet has done. Now, as relates to the internet, what it does, it presents a challenge to corporate media. And, that's something that we really have to understand. And just technology, period, and its impact on humanity, because these sources of information, mainstream media, the internet, present two different worlds, if you will, in that mainstream media is, again, a globalist perspective and agenda. It's not truly news. It's not journalism. It's propaganda, okay? And we know that propaganda has a way to really mold an individual and a nation's mind. And we see this mastered in Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, and how they went about pretty much brainwashing the entire nation to support their pogroms and the annihilation of this undesirable, so to speak. Whether or not that happened, history does show that. I think the numbers may be slightly inflated and exaggerated, and the target is also really not understood completely. And I'll maybe save that for a future time, as authors like Eustace Mullins really provide some very great investigative research and journalism to that particular matter. As we're winding down this second hour, I want to present some information to sum up what we're dealing with. This is an illusion. Everything we're dealing with is truly an illusion. This is, again, Mystery Babylon. And it's so interesting that, the scriptures speak of this confusion that exists in a movie that came out in the early 2000s called The Matrix, captured the zeitgeist of this particular matter, the spirit of the age, of the living space, what the spirit of this age, of this living space is like. And so this article comes to us from the International Business Times. And this would be my last article as far as bringing light to the darkness, because I want to bring the light out after that. But this is a simulation hypothesis. The name of the article by Tim Marson is Simulation Hypothesis. Living in the Matrix, Tech Billionaires Funding Research to Get Out. So this is a very interesting article. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all the standpoints. I want to bring out the principle of this illusion that is being lived in, that has been simulated by these social engineers. But tech billionaires' latest obsession, outside of suing websites into oblivion and attending odd, expensive festivals in the desert, is apparently one that gripped the country in 1999. The bad news, we're all just living in the Matrix. The good news, according to a New Yorker story this week, a couple of tech billionaires are secretly funding research to break us out. One can only assume that Keanu Reeves is on board as the project consultant. Now, we know that this, of course, was a book written called The Third Eye by Sophia Stewart. And she's gotten compensated for the Wachowski brothers stealing her information, her intellectual property, including that of the Terminator series, and making millions off of it. But she has been compensated for her intellectual property of The Third Eye. But jokes aside, the idea is called the simulation hypothesis, and it's growing in popularity with the Silicon Valley nouveau riche, as well as in idiosyncratic corners of Reddit. The New Yorker piece by Tad Friend was centered on Sam Altman, CEO of the startup accelerator Y Combinator, but took a detour into Matrix territory. Wrote Friend, many people in Silicon Valley have become obsessed with the simulation hypotheses. The argument, give me 1 second. that what we experience as reality is in fact fabricated in a computer. Two tech billionaires have gone so far as to secretly engage scientists to work on breaking us out of the simulation. The two billionaires from the New York profile are left unnamed, but there is one such tech billionaire who has publicly addressed the theory: SpaceX, Tesla CEO, and real life Tony Stark, Elon Musk. In fact, he thinks it's highly unlikely we're not in some form of simulation. This is what the illusion of Babylon has done. It has casted an illusion, a deception, a delusion on the entire world. There's a 1 in billion chance we're in base reality, he said, because the Torah is not central to our reality. We are not in reality. Musk said at the Recode Code conference in June. The strongest argument for us being in a simulation, probably being in a simulation, is the following. 40 years ago, interesting, 40 years, this is what the journey of Israel from the wilderness to the promised land took. We had Pong, 2 rectangles and a dot, Musk added. That is what games were. Now, 40 years later, we have a photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, the games will become indistinguishable from reality. This idea more or less originated in a 2003 paper by British philosopher Nicholas Bostrom. Vice's Motherboard did a good job of breaking down the majority takeaway from the paper, which posited that one of these is true. One, we're literally living in a computer simulation. Two, there is a strong aversion in advanced civilizations to making ancestor simulations. That is, highly evolved civilizations have no interest in making what are essentially video games of their past. Three, something destroys all civilizations before they are able to advance to the point where they are technologically capable of simulating consciousness. This is what took place at the Tower of Babel. Let us make a city for ourselves. Okay? Let us make a game, a simulation, a civilization for ourselves. Not what Yah has given us, but a simulated and a counterfeit existence. This is what this is all about. Musk, in essence, believes that the first of these three options is most likely to be true. That conclusion boils down to the idea that if technology is bound to advance far enough to create artificial intelligence, that it is indistinguishable from life, then that simulated life is bound to create more simulated life. It's all enough to give you a headache. But if we are in the Matrix, count your intrepid International Business Times correspondent in the camp of the character Cypher, who opted back into the simulation so he could enjoy a steak again, even if it was a mirage created by machines. Because if this is all a simulation, then hot wings probably aren't real, at least in the way we believe they exist. And we know they're modified. They're not real. There's a modification to everything that is taking place. And I don't want to live in a hot wingless world, he says, so he calls for the blue pill. So he's just calling people to go back to sleep. He's calling for people to go right back to sleep as opposed to waking up and seeing the simulated reality that we live in, this artificially created reality, this propagandistic reality that has been imposed upon our consciousness to keep us asleep and at each other's throat while the real enemy continues to make his living hand over fist and blood shed after bloodshed. I want to start wrapping this up. I got a few more articles I want to present to us. Some very interesting articles that are contrary to what we have just been dealing with. I want to bring some light to this darkness in terms of really understanding who has fashioned reality. And of course, this is dealing with our Creator. Let's see. Let's start with this here. Two more articles I want to address. The first one, if you give me one moment, comes to us from Ynet News. And Ynet News gives us this article about Rosh Hashanah in Uganda. So we know that this past week, on Yom Shani, or the second day of the week, which some call Monday, was Yom Teruah, or what the Ashkenazic Jewish and Sephardic Jewish world calls Rosh Hashanah, or the head of the year, which is understood traditionally as the day in which, or the month in which, creation was brought forth and Adam was brought forth. So again, spending Rosh Hashanah with the Ugandan Jewish community. And I want to really bring this out because, again, this is what you hear a lot in Israelite circles. We're not Hamites. Well, Israel went to the land of Ham and blended in with Ham because of our phenotype. And I'm not making this a matter of race. This is a matter of historical demographics. Okay, let's deal with this demographically. Let's deal with who the population was. What was their ethnicity? What was their nationality? Okay, I'm not making this a matter of race. There's only one race, but two seeds in that race. The only race that does exist is that of human race. Within that two seeds, according to Genesis 3, in verse 15, you have the seed of the woman and you have the seed of the serpent. But this article says, after Attai and Hadass Goldstein recently got married, they decided to have their honeymoon in Africa. Now look at that. Europeans taking honeymoons in Africa. The last place that many so-called Negroes and African Americans are thinking about going. They don't want to go to Africa. Matter of fact, I'm not African, they say. And this is Israel even speaking. Not even knowing that Israel itself is on the African tectonic plate, as I mentioned in the opening of this. The newly wedded couple visited Uganda, among other countries, where they celebrated the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah. However, the two were not alone, as they spent the festival in an isolated mountainous area with members of the Abba Yahudaya community who practice a form of Judaism, observing dietary laws and Shabbat. Everything started when we went on our honeymoon in Africa. Uganda is a very beautiful country with nice people, so we decided to go there as a part of our trip, Attai told Wane. We heard from all of our friends that there is a Jewish community in eastern Uganda in the mountains, so we thought that this would be a wonderful opportunity to do Rosh Hashanah there and at the same time to learn about their special way of life. So again, Uganda, not again, but if you're not familiar with Zionism and their push to find a Jewish home, a Jewish land, Uganda was their first choice besides Palestine or Canaan land or Israel. They were considering going to Uganda long before they were to go to Israel and set up a political state. Listen to me. This is very important because there were many Ashkenazic and many Sephardic and many even Mizrahi Jews that did go to the Holy Land and lived, I would say, peaceably at one time with the Arabs who had been brought in themselves. And so I want to just bring that article to you all, in that it is clear to see that there are African communities like the Abba Yahudaya and the Limba and the Biafrans, and there are many other tribes such as the Ashanti who identify as Israelites. And so this light that is shining in the continent is very important. And of course, this is on the heels of a August conference that took place in which Rabbi Capus Funye was crowned the chief rabbi of Hebrew Israelites. And it was a very interesting move, not to say I'm completely in full support or against it, as I'm waiting to see how this is to unfold. But I will say that it does allow for some very interesting developments and conversations to come about at its minimum. I want to end with this article here, and then I want to go into my closing article, my closing passage. It seems as if I got too many windows open on the internet, and my internet's moving slow, or maybe it is the new ICANN who has taken over the internet and caused the slowing of this process to take place. So please bear with me for just a moment. I get this article fully loaded and ready to run. It comes to us from Modern Ghana. The name of the article is called Creation, Connecting Akan Cosmology, Bible, and Geology. So again, this is an African consciousness that is also part and parcel with biblical ideology and geological realities. Give me a moment as it's loading. It is running a little slow. All right. This is by Ekwazi Boadu Nitioma. He says, when society invests in educating a kin, the kin was not privileged to look down on the society, but to revamp and uplift the societal practices for techno-socioeconomic liberation. Everything we've just been talking about. Techno-socioeconomic liberation. According to Akan cosmology, a dance in the present-day Ghana is the place of Odo Mankome, or Bore Bore, who they call God, who started creation of the world. This story sounded weird, and I debunked its authenticity, which is very typical of most educated Africans. We debunk traditional cosmologies because of our ignorance. Moreover, Western education tags anything it doesn't truly understand as superstitious. The Adans people, like any Akan group in Ghana, trace their root to ancient Babylonia, to Sumer. They go back to the Afro-Asiatic people in Sumer, or the Cushitic people, the Bantu people of Sumer. According to history, the name Adanse was derived from Idan Sifo, or house builders. They were the first settlers to build wattle and dal buildings. Another account says the name Adanse was derived from Adan Sifo, or witnesses. They are the principal witnesses to the Most High's creation. The second account is more potent because the Akan people all along were builders, even at Bono Manso, the first settlement of most Akan people. Hence, Adanse people weren't just the first house builders, but were witnesses. Why would Akan cosmology say that the present geographic location of Adanse is the starting point of creation of the world? This cosmogony isn't biased because Akan people know that they are immigrants at their present home, Ghana. Why would they say such a thing? Let us consider biblical account, which happens to be a guide to most anthropologists. Genesis 2:11 and 12 says, quote, the name of the first is Pishon. That is it which compasses the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium there, and the onyx stone. This is from the King JV. Eden, or Africa, is the birthplace of humanity according to anthropologists. Hence, Africa is the place that was described in the Genesis story. After creation, provinces were created, and each province was described based on peculiar items there. Names of provinces in chronological order: Havilah, Cush, Syria. To decode Havilah, we need to answer the following questions. What is the onyx stone? Where can fine gold deposit associated with onyx be located in Africa? What is the possible modern name for Pishon? Onyx stone is primarily composed of silica or silica and comes in different colors depending on the inclusions or the impurities. It has white color in its powdered form or streak and hardness of 6 out of 5/7 on the Mohs hardness scale. In antiquity, black onyx stone was the most revered type. Onyx stone is quartz, and therefore black onyx is simply smoky quartz. According to the International Union of Geological Sciences, the Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, not 6,000, 4.6 billion years old. This is from Griffiths et al. In their report on gold deposit of Ghana stated geology of West Africa is very complex with Paleo-Proterozoic origin. The most important Paleo-Proterozoic units are extensive sediments and volcanics, which are generally referred to as the Permian supergroup. The Permian rocks are very widely distributed throughout a large part of West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. So these are all strategic places also where you will see bases of Africom. So the Volta Basin in Ghana is underlain by Paleo-Proterozoic units with equivalent rocks in northwest Africa, which suggests that much of the Western Sahara has the same but buried Paleo-Proterozoic cratonic units as West Africa. Ghana by land settlement is the center of the world. Ghana is the second largest gold producer in Africa, to South Africa, not because of limited deposit, but because of exploration technology. Ghana has the finest gold deposits in Africa. Bozeman and Barbauld, European missionaries who acted as anthropologists, stated, quote, in the 17th century, gold from Adanse was referred to as Akani and was so pure and fine that the best gold was called Akani Sika, or Akani gold in the world, end quote. The fascinating occurrence is that the gold at the Adanse is associated with smoky quartz or onyx stone. The most important gold mineralization type in West Africa is the mesothermal auriferous arsenophrite in the quartz-vein mineralization. This is by far the most important type of gold occurrence in West Africa and is commonly referred to as the Ashanti type in recognition of the Obuasi area being the type locality and by far the largest gold deposit. Where is Obuasi located in Ghana? Isn't it in Adanse? Obuasi is just 15 kilometers from Okro-Kairi. The exact place of cosmology says that creation started. Isn't this the biblical Havilah? What is the modern Pishon? Enoch Ofri Jenner. Pishon is the Nile River. The Nile River is the longest river system in the world. An early civilization was born along the banks of this river in Egypt. It is the only river in the world that rises near the equator and flows into the middle latitudes. The Nile is a great river, but not the nearest river to the area rich in fine gold. The Volta River is 1,500 kilometers long, with black and red Volta as tributaries. Volta passes through the Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and Ghana. Volta is the nearest great river that encompasses the area with fine gold, which is associated with smoky quartz or onyx stone. Can bedulium be found in West Africa? Go figure out yourself. West Africa and Northwest Africa is geologically the biblical Havilah, and Pishon is Volta River. Contemporarily, the ancient biblical provinces would be West and West North Africa, or Havilah, Central, East, and South Africa, Ethiopia, and Middle East, which is Assyria. The Akan cosmology is original and wasn't adopted from the Europeans. If the Akan cosmology about creation is very accurate and not mere myth, who enlightened them? Akan people migrated from their original home and headed towards the center of the world, which is modern Ghana, without the help of Google Maps. Do you think such people were naive? This is the time educated blacks or African peoples must give critical analyses to their original and ancient traditions. We should stop debunking things we don't understand about Africa because the complex African knowledge gave birth to world civilization. African cosmology, such as the Dogon cosmology, are not bedecked with scientific jargons. They sound so weird and would be rejected by the uninitiated. However, with unbiased analyses, one will get easier understandings of the mysteries behind the hyperdimensions. Now, the beauty of this is that these are peoples from which Adam comes. Adam comes from the Bantu people as well. These are peoples who settled in the Levant, contemporarily with the people who settled in Mesopotamia. They migrated up into the Levant from the southern parts of Africa. What does this have to do with anything? This has to do with everything because our identity is crucial as it relates to our purpose and our mission in life, our vision, our calling, our ancestral knowledge and purpose of bringing forth this kingdom. So we have to take the world by the reins and bring forth this kingdom. And the signs that we are now witnessing are to waken us. It says, when all these signs come upon you, then you shall turn back and seek Yah your Elohim with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. These are the words which even the Master Yahushua spoke of us that would come to pass. And he tells us that blessed are those who endure to the end. And these are the things that will cause us to endure: our faithfulness, our understanding, our rootedness in this Torah, in this consciousness, in this understanding of our great ancestry and our connection to a much larger experience. What we're going through in America as exiles, as captives, is not isolated here. And it's not even relegated to our own cultural experience. There are other cultures and other nationalities and other ethnicities who are also suffering the same injustices. Well, for those who are distraught and distressed of these injustices, would it not behoove us to unify? Would it not behoove us to seek out some sort of common ideology that can coalesce our efforts? Would not the Torah itself be that unifying ideology and principle to guide us into our liberation, our salvation from our oppressors and our enemies, and to bring us into a new world to come, a new age, a renewed age in which our ancestral knowledge and lifestyles will be brought back to the forefront of this planet. Something that is much needed because the earth is crying out. These birth pains are wrecking this earth in order to cleanse it and to prepare it for the revelation of the children of Elohim. I want to close with words from one who is perhaps the most controversial figure in history. Some say he existed, some say he didn't exist. Some say he is Mashiach, some say he is not Mashiach. Hebrew Vision proclaims the existence of Mashiach Yahushua ben Yosef. These are words that he spoke to his taught ones about the signs of the times. He says this, or this reading says this in Matthew 24. And going out, Yahushua went away from the set-apart place, and his taught ones came near to point out to him the buildings of the set-apart place. And Yahushua said to them, "Do you not see all of these? Truly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another at all, which shall not be thrown down," because of the Roman Empire. It was going back way then, people, over 2,016 years ago. The Roman Empire in its infancy was starting to amass its power, and it destroyed Jerusalem, which was a major turning point in world history. And he sat on the Mount of Olives, and the taught ones came to him separately, saying, "Say to us when this shall be, and what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Yahushua answering said to them, "Take heed that no one leads you astray. First and foremost, do not be deceived. Do not get caught up in this simulated existence. Do not be misled by doctrines of demons. Do not be beguiled by these politicians who offer you promises but give you misery. Do not be led astray. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they shall lead many astray. And you shall begin to hear of fightings and reports of fightings. See that you are not troubled, for these have to take place, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and reign against reign, and there shall be scarcities of food, and deadly diseases, and earthquakes, in places. And all these are the beginnings of birth pains. Then they shall deliver you up to affliction and kill you, and you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many shall stumble, and they shall deliver up one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise up and lead many astray. And because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many shall become cold. But he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. And this good news of the reign shall be proclaimed in all the world as a witness to all the nations. And the end then shall come. These are serious words for a serious time. in which serious events are taking place. These events are intended to awaken those who sleep, who are called to be awakened, and to bring forth a light to this earth, which is bathed in darkness, as it was in the first chapter of Genesis, when that formlessness and void was present. Well, these are the present conditions of earth. There's violence everywhere. These are the days of Noah. There is the confusion of peoples, the confusion of genders, the confusion of nations and leaders. And these are the signs of the times that we must be aware of in order to make the corrections that are needed for the earth to be brought forth in reality, in truth, in compassion, in justice, in righteousness. And it is our firm conviction that this can only be brought about through adherence to the law of Torah, which is the mind of the Creator, who brought forth creation in 6 days and rested on the seventh, and set a seal on that day so that those who are in observance of that day proclaim that Yah, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is Elyon, is the Most High, is the Creator of heaven, earth, sea, and all that is in them. And it is our express duty to convince the world through all righteous deeds, through all righteous fruit, that we are to proclaim twice daily, Shema Israel, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad. Hear, O Israel, Yah is our Elohim, Yah is one. For it is only then, and only then, that mankind will be able to live in peace and to live in harmony. This is Mikael Corbin Yahoo. I'm signing off this evening. We will be back next week. Please tune in to Hebrew Vision, 6 p.m. Central Time on Yom Revi'i, the 5th day. Shalom Aleichem.